Hi, I've already talked about Iran and the prospect of going to war with Iran in several videos previously. Put some links in the above and then also in the description to some of the content which I talked about. However, I think the subject is worth revisiting, particularly now in light of Venezuela. Let me explain. If you're new here, my name is Michael Shirk and welcome to my YouTube channel, Pax Americana. I know the name's becoming increasingly ironic with each every day. Who am I? I'm a history PhD, former CIA analyst, former RAND Corporation senior political scientist, and now what I like to do in my free time, while I'm busy doing Africa-related business intelligence work, is to hold forth in front of my camera, which actually isn't even a camera, it's a Pixel 6 phone, which is what I use. Anyways, let's talk about Iran. We need to think this through. And honestly, perhaps that should be my catchphrase. We need to think this through. In this, I guess I'm perhaps actively echoing the great Marshal Ferdinand Foch, the French military leader, the guy who won the First World War. His catchphrase was, de quoi s'agit-il? Meaning, like, what's it all about? More or less. The same thing, sort of. Anyways, let's get a few things out of the way. In principle, I have no problem with bombing Iran. I'd call it an irrational reaction, juvenile perhaps, but I've long since thought that Iran had it coming, frankly, or at least the regime. I'm old enough to remember the hostage crisis of 1979 to 1981. Remember, I mean, it was a national humiliation, and like literally every night we would have dinner, and while having dinner, we would have the TV, black and white TV with rabbit ears, and we would watch CBS News, and it would always begin with that. It would always be about the hostages, and they do like this countdown. And today is the 400, the 222nd day of the hostage or whatever. It was bad. And we didn't do anything. And then they blew up our embassies and we didn't do anything. And then they took more hostages. And this time we did do something, but we actually idiotically sold them weapons in the insane notion that maybe this would help encourage the moderates in the Iranian regime. And then they blew up our Marine barracks. They killed 240 something sailors and soldiers and Marines. And we really didn't do anything. And I could go on and on and on. By the way, also, I realize that most of you probably don't know anything or have ever even heard of the AMIA bombing in 1994. That's when the Iranian government thought it was a really clever idea to drive a truck bomb into the Jewish community center of Buenos Aires. Nothing to do with Israel. It's a Jewish community center, where people go and they do fitness classes and they swim and they take art classes and that kind of thing. They killed 85 Argentines. I mean, to hell with this government. Now, I am 100% convinced that had Carter done the following, he could have wrapped up the hostage crisis in a few weeks. Basically, all he had to do was threaten to set the country ablaze while amassing military forces in the region. Give us the hostages or we'll blow everything up. And then meanwhile, you gather the means to do it. And then after they give you the hostages, because they're scared, go ahead and do it anyways, because you've got to send the message. But he didn't do that. I'm sure that had he done that, the world today would be a better place. A lot of the terrible things that have happened since then would not have happened. And then, of course, Ronald Reagan had ample opportunities to do so because, like, they did blow up our embassies and they did kill all of our, blow up the barracks. Plenty of excuses for doing terrible things, and Reagan didn't. Reagan, it turns out, was a chicken hawk. He only had courage to beat up on little Grenada, which was a gigantic threat to U.S. national security and offered very stiff resistance. And then came 2001. The United States, terrified by the idea that terrorists might get their hands on nuclear weapons, went after a country that had neither nuclear weapons program nor had a real good track record of sponsoring terrorism. It was shockingly obvious at the time that if that's what you're worried about, the intersection of nuclear weapons and international jihadist terrorists, there are two addresses for that: Pakistan and Iran. But we didn't do that. So we invaded Iraq. It's just it's insane. We also have to remember that Iran is one of the great spoilers of the Arab-Israeli peace process. Yes, it's true that lots of people have a share of the blame, what's happened with Oslo and all that, including the Israelis. But the fact of the matter is that it's Iran's sponsorship of extremist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah that are really what killed Oslo and are also what have killed the Israeli left wing. And here we are today. And a lot of this is Iran's fault. So to hell with them all. Before I continue, I want to tell you about UPDF, which is kindly sponsoring this video. What is UPDF? UPDF is a PDF editor, much like Adobe Acrobat, only it costs about a quarter of the price of Adobe. Plus, you can use it on Mac, Windows, iPhone, and Android. With one subscription, you can have it all synced on up to 4 devices. So let me just show you. Here we are on UPDF. We are looking at a scan that I made with my phone, and you can read it, but you can't do much else with it. But the cool thing is it's not a big deal, because with UPDF, you can hit this button OCR. It formats it into an editable PDF that allows you to use all the tools that you want to manipulate it. And here it is. Here's a version that I can manipulate like a Word document. I can change the size of fonts. I could change the font. I can change the color of the font. I can write things, delete things. I could also move images around and manipulate the images. But the real game changer is that here on the upper right corner is this AI button. It gives you a discussion. This is what the document is. And it prompts you with some questions. And then you can ask it to summarize. You can ask it questions. Like here I asked, what does it say about U.S. support? And then it gave a whole discussion. You can generate a mind map. And what the mind map does is it creates a chart of the arguments that are made within this document. What I love about a UPDF is that it enables me to take documents. Sometimes they're long documents. Sometimes they're in languages I don't know. It allows you to extract knowledge out of them. For me, it is an extraordinarily powerful tool that saves me a lot of time. I recommend you check it out. It's risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus also, if you check out the links in the description and in the pinned comment, you can grab an exclusive discount for UPDF or also test UPDF for free. Okay, so thank you for putting up with that. Let's get back to Iran. Last year, there was a golden opportunity. Israel had dismantled Iran's proxy forces in Lebanon and Gaza, and then went after Iran's nuclear program and its ballistic missile arsenal. This was amazing. Israel obliterated Iran's air defenses. It did serious damage to the nuclear program and also the ballistic missile arsenal. How much damage it did to the nuclear program, it's hard to know, and there's a lot of debate about whether or not they could really finish the job without American support. So all of the eyes were on Trump. We were expecting him to perhaps give a coup de grace to the nuclear weapons program using his B-2s with their deep penetrating bunker buster bombs. And he did, finally. He came around. Trump dropped some bombs, declared victory, and ended the war. And then he obliged Israel to do the same thing. And that was that. That's what happened. Then afterwards, bit by bit, suddenly a lot of Iranian civilians started protesting, and then it became like an open rebellion against the Iranian regime. And once again, it looked like, oh my gosh, maybe something's going on here. Maybe the regime's going to fall. Maybe we should do something. Again, all eyes are on Trump. Trump has not done anything. Oh, but he did issue a red line. And he said if the mullahs start killing civilian protesters, then there would be consequences, capital C. Of course, they went ahead and killed a lot of protesters, and they're probably still killing protesters, and Trump hasn't done anything, except he's amassed a lot of forces. Maybe he'll do something with those forces. Maybe he won't. But we shall see. Something else happened during this period of time, which was Venezuela. Trump built up a very massive force before finally attacking. Now, the fact that he attacked actually came as no surprise, given the scale of the forces that he had concentrated in the area. What is surprising, though, is what Trump did not do. He did not topple the Venezuelan regime. He did not. He did not install and empower Venezuela's opposition leaders. He did not. In fact, he actually sidelined them altogether. And then he allowed the most important or the most prominent opposition leader of all, Maria Corina Machado, to humiliate herself by handing him her Nobel Prize while beaming like a child on Christmas morning. What he did do was confiscate Venezuelan oil. Now, what I've read is that the sale of the confiscated oil generated $500 million. $300 million of that reportedly went to Venezuela for aid. $200 million went to a Qatari fund. Seriously? Also, the initial $250 million of the deal was handled through the company Littell, which happens to be owned by a major Trump donor. So he got a bunch of oil and then he sold it. And I have no doubt that he made a pretty penny off of that. And now Trump is trying to explore different arrangements with Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, while effectively holding a gun to her head. To what end? Now, maybe he's going to oblige her to do certain things that benefit the U.S., like steering the country away from Cuba, Russia, and Iran. That would be good. Or maybe he'll just use his leverage to impose American oil firms on the country for their profit, and no doubt for his. Or maybe both. We don't know. We're all just waiting to watch. What does Venezuela have to do with Iran? I think this is really important. It has several things to do with Iran. First of all, it confirms that Trump has no taste, not really, for big wars or regime change or an invasion. To be frank, that's a good thing. So that's not bad. In and of itself, that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, he likes quick and decisive actions that achieve his objectives. I can respect that. Invading and occupying Venezuela would be a terrible, terrible idea. Invading and occupying Iran would be an even worse idea. Don't do it. So if you can do some quick thing that's decisive and achieves your objectives, great, right? But secondly, and perhaps most importantly, Trump's objectives may surprise us. This is really important. Since the beginning of Trump's meteoric rise through the American political scene, a large part of his success comes from his ability to encourage people to project upon him their fantasies. So whatever your fantasy is, and this is particularly valuable for like one-issue voters, whatever your thing is, you're going to see Trump as the guy who's going to deliver that thing. So there are these China hawks who really want the U.S. to be super aggressive vis-a-vis China. And they look at Trump and they're like, yeah, he's going to be our man. He's going to be super aggressive against China. Is he? Well, yeah, there's some really nasty rhetoric. But aside from like some promiscuous throwing around of on again, off again tariffs and whatnot, there's really no coherent plan, and he's remarkably inconsistent. And I think he definitely make the case that he's not actually that aggressive against China. So the China hawks are disappointed. The Venezuela hawks all thought that he was going to take down the Chavez regime and change everything, and he's going to bring in democracy. He's going to do this and he's going to do that. Did he? No. He got rid of Maduro, but the regime that Hugo Chavez created remains intact. He just got some money out of the deal. And then look at, likewise, Israel hawks have long been hoping that he was going to deliver everything that they wanted, the whole wish list of things that they wish the U.S. would do to support Israel. I have long maintained, and I am an Israel hawk, but I have long maintained that Trump would disappoint them at the end of the day. He's done some things to support Israel, it's true, but he's also done other things that really do not. And it's also clear that he's not interested, like he's not really out to help the Israelis or the Gazans or anybody. And just look at this Board of Peace thing. Like, what the hell is that? It's really hard to know. Supposedly, in order to join the Board of Peace, to become a permanent member, you have to pay in to the tune of $1 billion. And this is the part that I find really interesting. Nobody knows if anybody who's joined the Board of Peace has actually paid $1 billion. And if they have, nobody has any idea what he would even do with the money. Where did the money go? Where would he put the money? It's all invisible. There's no transparency whatsoever. It's all, by the way, entirely unconstitutional. There's no mechanism for the U.S. government to be doing this. This is like a side project. It's like a real estate hustle that he's got going in addition to his day job, which is being the president of the United States. Let's bring this back to the question of bombing Iran. Here's the big question, the really big question. To what end? Okay, setting aside my admittedly kind of irrational and perhaps even juvenile desire for payback, right, from the hostages and all that kind of stuff, and for AMIA. And honestly, I feel like if you oblige the Iranians to make any deal, they should at least acknowledge and apologize for AMIA, right? But we need to think about all of the stuff I've been harping about in all of these videos about military strategy, particularly all the videos that I've done about my favorite military strategist, General Andre Boff. The bottom line of the most important insight, perhaps, from these military strategists, the good ones, like Boff, is that war is a tool for achieving a desired political end. You have to be able to define what is your desired political end state. So what is ours? What is Trump's? What does he want to achieve through military action vis-a-vis Iran? Now, my objective, if I were to do such a thing, would be regime change. Let's get rid of this horrible, horrible regime. But that said, I am very skeptical about how one can actually achieve that by bombing things. And I would be the last to recommend a ground invasion of Iran. Toppling regime from afar probably requires a comprehensive subversion plan, working with local allies and local rebels and working clandestinely with all sorts of people. Can it be done? Probably, at least in theory. I think the U.S. might have done this before in the past in other countries. And also we would have Israeli help, which would be really great because Israeli intel in Iran very clearly is extraordinary. It could all be done, theoretically. But could this current administration do it? I really have my doubts. I just don't believe that they have the intellect or the competency or whatever to put together such a complex and sophisticated plan. It's really hard to do. And had such a plan existed, maybe wouldn't we have already seen evidence of it? I mean, you could argue that we are. It just hasn't worked out as well as we'd like. Like maybe these rebellions and the people on the streets, maybe that was all part of the plan. Or it's evidence that the plan is doing things, just hasn't gone far enough. That's possible. But again, I could kind of doubt it. Now, I've been asking around friends in D.C. because, a lot of people I know are also similarly like they're Iran hawks. And I guess I'm an Iran hawk. I'm just kind of an Iran hawk with second thoughts, right? I'm a skeptical Iran hawk. meaning I really dislike Iran. On the other hand, I'm skeptical about what we could actually possibly plausibly do about it, or what Trump is possibly plausibly going to do about it. So I say, is there a way that we can take down this regime without invading it just through airstrikes alone? And there's a theory that maybe if we were to do something like liquidate the IRGC, the Islamic Republic, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that would change the balance of power within the country of Iran and would enable the different anti-regime factions to actually begin to prevail, because all the really hardcore guys, like the SS, it's like you take down Nazi Germany by wiping out the SS. Would that actually work? I don't know enough about Iran to know if that would work. And then I have to ask, well, does anybody know enough? Like, who would even know if that would work? Let's say you could do it, and we could probably do it, but would it really work? And I don't know. I feel like all of us at this point should be super skeptical about the efficacy of air power alone. The best argument I think you can make for just an air power centric thing in the absence of any really comprehensive subversion plan is that with air power, you can scare somebody enough and do enough damage that you can make them behave themselves for a while. Like, you can bring them to heel, make them change their behavior, make them stop being naughty for a while, right? And maybe that would work. Maybe. I don't know. It's like, do you know, can you actually say with 50%, there's a greater than 50% probability that that would be the effect? And is that effect enough to justify all the risks that might be associated with what you're proposing to do? Everything is debatable here. We could also wipe out the oil industry. We can destroy the oil infrastructure in Iran. That would be great. I kind of wish Carter had done that, or Reagan. Maybe that would have a good effect. It would certainly really piss off the Chinese because they're a major importer of Iranian oil. So that introduces a lot of risk involved. Like, there's one thing about being kind of like stern with the Chinese, but do you want to pick a fight with them? That's a whole other thing, right? Be careful there. And then also, if we cut off the flow of Iranian oil to China and to the others who buy Iranian oil, then they're going to have to buy oil off of the global market, which is going to have the result of raising oil prices globally, even here in the United States, where we produce more and more of our own oil, where we certainly don't import Iranian oil. So the cost of oil will go up, the cost of gasoline will go up. Chinese will be massively pissed off. So you're going to have to do a really complex calculus of the pros and the cons of doing that. And again, like, I don't know if if our government really has the wherewithal to do that kind of thing. I'm just super skeptical. But my desired outcome would be regime change, although I hesitate about how you pull that off. What is Trump's desired end state? In light of Venezuela, I strongly doubt that Trump aspires to do anything so ambitious or risky as regime change. I think it's most likely that he wants a deal, and he keeps talking about a deal, and reportedly there are all these negotiations going on now in Oman. But what kind of deal would he make with Iran? Okay, we should assume that one part of the deal is going to be, of any deal, one major feature of the deal is going to be a shakedown that will end up with Iran handing the United States a whole bunch of oil. And then Trump is going to sell that oil and enrich a bunch of his friends. I think that's virtually guaranteed. What else is going to be part of the deal? Just as he might be using his leverage on Delcy Rodriguez to move Venezuela away from Cuba and Russia and Iran, he might be trying to seek a deal with Iran that would alter its policies somewhat. Maybe he'll seek once again to end Iran's nuclear program. Apparently that's being discussed. Maybe to end their ballistic weapons program. Maybe he'll seek to end Iran's support for the different proxy groups and different militia. Maybe. But once Iran agreed to any of these things, would there be any follow-through? Would there be any validation? Would there be any way of monitoring and enforcement? And I feel very certain that this is how it's going to play out. Iran will sign a deal, and in the deal they're going to say, okay, well, here's like 100 million barrels of oil. You do with it as you wish. And Trump's like, thank you very much, and puts it in his pocket. And we agree, yeah, sure, we will get rid of our nuclear weapons program. We will stop enriching uranium, and we're going to stop our support to Hezbollah and to all of our militias and the Houthis and all those characters in Iran, and we're going to be very, very good boys from now on, right? Fingers crossed, behind the back, right? And Trump will be like, this is the greatest victory ever. Like, I just accomplished what Obama couldn't accomplish, what lazy, sleepy Joe couldn't accomplish, and I'm the greatest president ever. Now you need to, goddamn it, you need to give me the Nobel Peace Prize. But then the second that paper is signed, that paper it will be worth less than the ink or less than the ink with which it was written, right? Because from then on, the name of the game for the Iranian point of view would be how to subvert the agreement, how to go around the agreement, and how to get away with violating the agreement. It will do something and then look to see what the Americans do, okay, and do a little bit more, and then look to see, and it's going to test. And I guarantee you that before you know it, the whole thing will just be ridiculous. So that's the kind of deal that Trump is going to have. So look, my bottom line is that I'm just really leery. And obviously, I'm not a pacifist. And I also think that thanks to Israel, Iran's ability to threaten others with its missiles and its proxies is much reduced compared to what it was just a few years ago. There's just much less risk. So this is further proof, if anybody needed any, that October 7th was a really bad idea. Because ironically, this is all because of October 7th. What bothers me is my lack of confidence that the White House has a coherent plan, or at least a coherent plan for doing anything more useful than pillaging oil. Now, one can argue that a serious demonstration of force after all these decades might convince Iran's government to at least be more circumspect, at least for a while. And that could be a good thing, albeit a short-lived thing, probably. But here's another concern. Trump, all right, he doesn't have Iran's people's interests at heart, fine. He doesn't have Israel's people at heart, interests at heart. I don't even think he's got America's interests at heart, the American people's interests at heart. And this is new. This is different. George W. Bush's decision to invade Iraq was, I think, a strategic blunder. It was one of the dumbest things we've ever done. I mean, this is just really, really bad. But I have no doubt that Bush did it because he really thought it was in the best interest of the country and of the American people. I think he really believed that. Right or wrong, that whether the decision was right or wrong, in a way, his motives were good. And the same thing can be said about Bush's father, or about President Obama, or about President Carter, or about President Reagan, or President Nixon, right? So Trump, you could argue that he has America's interests at heart, only to the extent that he appears to identify his personal interests with those of the nation. I just keep thinking more and more of Louis XIV, Louis XIV. L'État c'est moi, he said. I am the state. Indeed. Thank you very much. I hope you found this video enjoyable. If you look in the description, you're going to find links to some of my other work about Iran, as well as to my social media. I'm too active on X, and then also on Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and my website, michaelsharkin.com. Plus, there's my weekly Substack, which is also called Pax Americana. Please stay tuned for more. There's plenty more in the pipeline. And don't forget to check out the links to UPDF in the description, also in the pinned comment below. Thank you. Bye-bye.